So in this video, we're going to run a report where we are linking tables together. So what we like to look for in this report is a list of the employees who have sold a particular product. So if we know of a particular product and maybe we're calculating commissions or that sort of thing, we want to find out who's sold any of this product. And at a simple level, if we can just get all the individual employees who have sold a particular product, that's our first list that we would be working with. Now, the issue here is that we have got employees in one table, products in another table, and the thing that links those two together is the sales table. So in order to get this report, we have got to be looking at the sales table, the employees table, and the products table, and we've got to somehow say that we're interested in all of those records in the employees table, where if we went to the sales table and found all the products with this particular ID and matched all the salespeople who sold those products, and then go to the employees table to get the salespeople, that employee's name, first name and last name, we need to kind of bring all that together. So what we need to learn is how do we actually verbalize that or express that in an SQL query. So we've done some sort of fairly straightforward queries before. This is getting a little bit more complicated, but before we can run anything, we would need to, I just need to install the SQL connector again, because I've just come back to this, or in this case it had been run before. So there's a few things that we need to do just to get this set up. So just as a recap of what we've done before, we have to import the MySQL connector. So that's the library that will allow us to make a connection to the database. So we do need to run that. And once I've run these cells, anything below them will remember that that's happened. We need to actually connect to the database. So I'm going to connect to the sales database with using the connect function, giving it all the details of that database. I'll run that so that I've got a database, and my database connection is now called SalesDB. Previously, we'd called it MyDB. In this case, because it's specifically this sales database, I'm going to call it SalesDB. Then we need a function that will execute a query. So if we give this function a query, it should execute it. And I've just added a little bit to this function, in that instead of always executing the query on the same database, I'm going to expand the parameters with that on that function so that it can be told what the query is and which database to run that query on. So give it a database connection, give it a query, and it'll go and run it. It makes it a lot more flexible. So my database is now called DB rather than MyDB as it was called before. But otherwise, everything's the same here. It will set up a cursor, which is what can actually do the execution of the query, run the query, and then it will try to get the results of that query, which can sometimes cause problems and can sometimes cause a crash if you don't actually catch those errors. So we're going to try that, and a try except construct will catch any errors that happen, and before the program has had a chance to crash, it will deal with those errors so that the program can kind of die gracefully rather than crashing with all sorts of error messages. So if it can get the records, it will fetch all the records and return them. If it can't get them, then it will print that there's an error and return nothing. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use the execute query function, and we're going to use the fact that we've got that connection already set up, and we're going to run this report. So just to get started, we just need to remind ourselves of the names that are in this table. So I'm going to start by making a query, and that query is going to be show tables. So I want to be able to run query show tables so I can see what these tables are. We need to execute the query, and we want to take the results and put them into a variable which we'll call results. So execute query is the function. We need to give it the, first of all, if we go back up to the function, it first of all needs the query, then it needs the database. So query called query, and our database this time is called SalesDB. So I'm going to tell it the name of the database connection, and it's got all the information it needs in order to run that query. And we'll just print the results so we can see what we've got. And there we go. We've got the 4 tables, which match the tables that we had here, with the exact same capital letters in the same places. So what we're going to assume from now on is that whatever is in here is the correct field name. So if it says this is the schema for that, or the style schema for this database. So if product ID is spelt with a capital P and a capital I and capital D, that's how we need to address it when we're referencing it. So the first thing we're going to do, we've got the show table, so we know that our employees table, our products table, and our sales table are spelt like that. So that's brilliant. Let's now run another query to find a product to investigate. So in order to do that, I'm just going to show a list of all the products, and we'll choose one from there. So in order to get all products from the product table, I'm going to set the and we actually want the name from the product table. So let's just check what that product name is called. Sorry, I've gone to the wrong place. Product is just called name with a capital N. So we want the name of all the products in the product table. So let's change that to select name from products. So we're going to get all of the names of the products from the product table. Everything else stays the same. We've just changed the query, same database, and we're going to print the results. So there's the names of all of the products in that. There's loads of them. Let's just go for a nice easy one because it's quite quick to type in. Let's go for the bearing ball. That's the product that we want. So let's just copy that so that we can use that in a bit. So what we want to do is to run a query to find all employees who've sold at least one of those products. So we want to look at that product, find all of the sales of that product, and for every sale we need to get the employee ID and go to the employee table and find the first name and last name of that employee. So this is going to be quite a complex query, and one thing that's really useful and probably useful to know is that you can, with when you're typing in strings, we did cover this early on, but it's probably something you may not have had to use so far. When you're looking at strings, if you type 3 double quotes at the beginning and 3 double quotes at the end, you can put them over a number of lines and it ignores the line ends. So our query, let's just start with what we want to get out of it. So what do we want in the end? We want the employees. We're going to select, sorry, got an E on the end there. There we go. Employees, we want the employee's first name. So we put the name of the table dot and then the name of the field, and that should get us the right field from the right table. And that's important because we might have fields in other tables with the same name. So we're being very specific about where these names are coming from. That one. So last name, we checked that this is how they're spelt in there. So we want the employee's first name and we want the employee's last name from the product table, from the employees table, and we are going to get the information from. Now in this case we know that we've got 3 tables we need to look at. We need to look at the sales table to get sale of the product. We need the products table so that we can look up the name, and we need the employees table so that we can the first name and the last name from the employees table. Right, just to make this a little bit easier to read, I'm going to separate this out. So we've got select on the first line. What do we actually want to get back? We want to get the employee's first and last name. We need, in order to get that, we need the sales table, the products table, and the employees table. We now need to, I'm just going to put a space at the end there for when it puts it together again. We now need to give it the conditions. So there's a number of things that we are looking for here. So the first thing that we need to look for is that the employee ID in the employees table matches the employee ID in the sales table. So if we go back to here, in the sales table, the employee ID is the salesperson ID. So we need that salesperson ID to match the employee ID. So we can put that, so we're sales, sales, I can't remember if I had a capital P or not. Yeah, it does. Sales person ID is equal to employees dot employee ID. And again, I'm just going to go and check that I've got that right. Employee ID with capital I, capital D. So that's our first thing that we need to check. We can then check other things. So we've got an and. So let's carry on with that. So and the sales dot product ID is equal to the ID in the product table. So we need the salesperson to be this. We need to get the employees, the right employee for the salesperson, and we need to get the right product ID. They have got the same name in both tables, which is reasonably helpful. So sales product ID is equal to products product ID. So that's we've matched up the employee with the salesperson ID. We've matched up the product with the product ID. The last thing that we're looking for is that the product name is equal to, and we said we wanted bearing ball. That's what we're looking for. So what we're doing here is we're saying if you can go into the sales table and find every sale where, if we look at the product ID and then go to that product ID, we can see that the name is bearing ball, and in the same sale we can go to the employee ID when we can get their last name and first name. So there's a lot going on here, but it's just linking those tables together, and you've literally got, you've just identified where the links are. The salesperson ID links to the employee ID, and the product ID in the sales table links to the product ID in the products table. And I've got two lots of that in there, so I apologise about that. Got carried away and typed it twice. So the ID in the sales table matches the ID in the employees table. That's identifying the employee. The product ID in the sales table matches the product ID in the product. That's in identifying the product. And then we're interested in only those products where the name is bearing ball. So I'm hoping that that will run first time. Fingers crossed. It didn't. Oh, and I've forgotten. So that's telling me there, unknown column product.name. And that's because you probably spotted it before I did. It's product, it's not product. This, if you remember when you were doing the earlier exercises on this, this one had over 1 million records in it. So sometimes the time taken to read the data from the database will be quite long. So don't give up on it. It may take a little bit of time. Databases, when they're especially when they're hosted in the cloud, will often go to sleep. So it's an energy saving and a storage saving mechanism that means that the databases are not up and running and kind of quick to connect to at a time when nobody's actually being connected to them. So we will sometimes have to, when we run a query, if it's the first query we've run for a little while, the first thing it's got to do is wake up the database. Then it's got to make the connection. It's got to check that those connections are active and that they're safe. And then it's got to go through all of those millions of records and actually put this query together. So it will take a little bit of time, which we will have to wait for. And while we're waiting, just a quick recap. Colab notebooks don't have the connector library installed as standard, so that each time you come back to a worksheet, you will have to just rerun this line just to make sure that it's done it. If it's already there, it's not a problem. It'll check that it's already there and it won't install it again. You will always need to import MySQL Connector if you're going to be using a connector in your code. You need to make the connection to the database and give it a name. And for that, you will need to have already got all of the database details. So where it is, what port it's using, what the user and their password are, and what the name of the database is. And this has come back now. And then we've got an execute query function, which has been set up so that you can tell it, you can give it the connection, tell it the query, it will go off and do it, and then it will return the results. So if we go down here, we've now got the results of this query, and we've got quite a lot of records in there. We print the length of the results instead of the results. I think I'm hoping that if we don't actually run the query again, but we just print the length of the results, it should remember it. Come back. Yeah, 26,484, rather a lot. But what you'll notice, if we go back, they should come back fairly quickly, I hope. Yep. A lot of them are the same person. So this one person has sold that product a number of times, and so that's why we've got so many results. So it's actually much more useful to have all of the unique people in there, just the individual names. And we can do that by after the select thing, we can say select distinct. And what that means is, if I select them all, but only give me the unique items in that list. And this should come back fairly quickly. Oh, which it won't because I commented that out. And hopefully should just give us those names. Because this is a different query, it's having to go back and do it again. But it's not shouldn't be having to wake it up this time. It should be reasonably quick. So just to recap what we've done, we started off just to make sure that the tables had the names that we thought they should have. We've shown the tables. We've then had a look at the list of products using select and the name, select name from products to see what we want to look for. We then run a query to find all of the employees who sold one of those products, and we've now just narrowed that down to individual names. So we're not interested in how many times they've sold it, we're just interested if they've sold it at least once. And when we get to this stage, we've got 5 people, and we could pretty up or prettify the printout by using a loop, which would be, again, let's just, for results in results, we'll make a loop to do that. We need to print results rather than results. But if we notice that each of them is a tuple, so we want to print the first item in the tuple and the second item in the tuple, and that should give us a much nicer, neater output in the end. And I should have probably commented out the query so that we didn't have to run that again. Hopefully it won't be too slow. So it's getting there. So distinct allows us to get unique values. So that's similar to the pandas unique. We need to say what we want to actually show. So we wanted first name and last name, the tables that are involved, how the tables link together, and then finally what it is exactly that we're looking for. And we've got a much neater printout there. Thanks for watching.